They say truth sleeps until a child speaks it out loud. And sometimes, the smallest voice can wake buried secrets the world worked hard to forget. On an ordinary morning in Seoul, under the mirrored glass of a corporate tower, a single word was about to change 3 lives forever. If you believe every child deserves to know where they come from and that no lie stays buried forever, make sure to like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after it ends. The story begins with Naomi Okafor, a poised Black woman in her early 30s, clutching the small hand of her 8-year-old son Eli as they stood before the sleek facade of Hyundai Global, one of South Korea's most powerful corporations. It was the kind of morning that looked almost too perfect, winter sunlight glinting off glass, the hum of Seoul life rising like distant music, but Naomi's heartbeat was anything but calm. Beneath her wool coat, her palms were damp, her stomach tight with a familiar ache that had nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with memory. 10 years ago, she had promised herself she would never step foot in this city again. And yet here she was, because her son, her curious, bright, unrelenting son, had questions she could no longer dodge. Hanteca's lobby looked like it had been carved from marble and ambition. Executives glided across the floor like ghosts in tailored suits, and Naomi felt every stare that lingered on her skin, every whispered "foreigner" she pretended not to hear. But Eli was unfazed. The boy's eyes darted from the chandeliers to the glass elevators, wide with wonder. "Mama," he whispered, his voice full of excitement. "It's like a movie." Naomi smiled faintly, kneeling to adjust the collar of his little jacket. "Just remember, we're here to meet someone, okay? Be polite. Listen." And don't, she paused, searching for words heavy with unspoken history. "Don't say anything strange." Eli frowned, confused but obedient. The receptionist, a young woman with crimson lipstick and perfect posture, barely hid her surprise when Naomi approached the desk. "Good morning," Naomi said in calm, fluent Korean, sliding forward an envelope. "I'm here for an appointment." The woman blinked, surprised at her accentless speech, then glanced at the boy beside her. "And you are?" Naomi offered a soft smile. "Naomi Okafor. And this is my son, Eli." The receptionist nodded, typing something into her tablet, but Naomi caught the flicker in her expression, the quick, assessing glance at Eli's face, at his golden brown skin and dark, almond-shaped eyes. Eyes that looked far too familiar. For 10 years, Naomi had avoided seeing those eyes on anyone but her son. For 10 years, she had buried the name Han Seo-jin beneath oceans of distance and silence. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. Today, she had come only for a professional meeting, at least that's what she told herself, but fate, as always, had other plans. As they waited, Eli swung his legs against the polished marble bench, humming to himself, while Naomi tried not to notice how every surface around her reflected her anxiety back at her. She checked her phone. The email from Hanteca's HR was simple: interpreter position, final interview, 10 a.m. She hadn't realized until 2 nights ago that Hyundai Global was the same empire run by him. By the time she found out, her son had already seen the company name on her screen and said, "Mama, maybe my dad works there." She laughed it off then, but now, as the elevator doors opened across the lobby, the air shifted in a way that made her heart stop. The man who stepped out looked like success personified. Han Seo-jin, CEO of Hyundai, Forbes Asia's youngest, visionary under 40. Crisp charcoal suit, black hair slicked back, face as unreadable as stone. He spoke into his phone in fast, clipped Korean about quarterly earnings, barely glancing around as he crossed the floor. But Naomi didn't need his attention to recognize him. Her body remembered before her mind did. The scent of him. The way his brow furrowed when he was thinking. The faint scar at his temple she'd once kissed in the dark. And then, before she could even breathe, her son looked up from his seat, his gaze locking on Seojin's face. Something unspoken sparked in his small chest, a strange, instinctive recognition that defied logic. Eli's lips parted, and with the clarity only a child can summon, he pointed across the marble floor and said in a clear, confident voice, "Daddy." The world went silent. The receptionist froze mid-sentence. Two interns turned to stare. Even the soft jazz playing through the speakers seemed to vanish. Seo-jin stopped walking. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering against the marble like a gunshot. For a long moment, no one moved. His eyes, dark and unreadable, found Naomi's across the lobby, and in that instant, the past she'd buried for a decade came roaring back to life. Naomi's throat tightened. "Eli," she whispered sharply, her voice trembling, "come here." But the boy looked from his mother to the tall man standing frozen just a few feet away, confusion flickering in his expression. "Mama," he whispered, tugging at her sleeve. "He looks like me." Cameras clicked, employees pretending to check their phones, recording the scandal blooming right before them. Naomi stood, her face calm but her pulse racing. Seo-jin took one uncertain step forward, then another. "Naomi," he said finally, voice low, disbelieving. She wished she could disappear into the marble. She'd imagined seeing him again so many times, how she'd confront him, how she'd tell him what his silence cost her, but she'd never imagined this. "Yes," she said evenly, lifting her chin, "it's me." The air between them was electric, thick with things unsaid. He looked at Eli, then back at her, eyes wide with shock. "You have a child," he said softly, almost to himself. Naomi's jaw clenched. "We have a child," she corrected. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Eli blinked, sensing the tension but not understanding. "Mama, what's wrong? Did I say something bad?" Naomi knelt, forcing a shaky smile. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." But when she looked up, Seo-jin's expression was unreadable, somewhere between awe, confusion, and guilt. Security guards hovered uncertainly near the elevators, unsure whether to intervene. The receptionist whispered urgently into her headset, no doubt alerting someone upstairs. Within minutes, word would spread that the mighty Han Seo-jin had just been called Daddy by a stranger's child who happened to look exactly like him. Naomi straightened, her voice steady. "This isn't the place," she said quietly. "Not here." Seo-jin nodded slowly, his jaw tightening. "Follow me," he said, gesturing toward the private elevators. She hesitated, the weight of 1,000 memories pressing down on her. But then Eli squeezed her hand and whispered, "Mama, I think he knows us." And as the three of them stepped into the mirrored elevator, surrounded by the stunned silence of an entire lobby watching, Naomi realized something terrifying. She had walked into this building for a job interview, but she was about to walk back into a past she'd never truly escaped. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing them in. The reflection showed three faces, one woman haunted by love and betrayal, one man bound by guilt and silence, and one innocent child who had just spoken the truth that could unravel them all. And above the hum of the elevator, the narrator's voice returned, calm but tinged with warning. "Sometimes the truth doesn't knock, it walks in wearing the face of your child." The mirrored elevator rose in tense silence, each floor indicator glowing like a countdown. Naomi kept her eyes fixed on her reflection, refusing to look at the man beside her. Her son, oblivious to the war of memories between them, hummed softly under his breath, tracing his small hand along the cold steel walls. Seo-jin stood rigid, his jaw tight, the composure of a corporate titan barely holding beneath the storm brewing in his chest. When the elevator finally opened to the top floor, he gestured toward a glass-walled conference room overlooking Seoul's skyline. Inside, he said quietly. Naomi hesitated, then stepped in. The view was breathtaking, sprawling towers, the Han River winding like a silver thread, but all she saw was the reflection of the man who had once promised her the world and then vanished from it. For a long moment, neither spoke. The air buzzed with electricity, thick with 10 years of silence. Finally, he broke it. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was low, raw. Naomi laughed softly, a sound without humor. "Tell you? You mean after your mother threatened to destroy me if I didn't disappear? After your assistant called me a mistake?" She met his gaze, her eyes blazing. "You knew what she was capable of, Seo-jin. You let her erase me." His shoulders stiffened, but there was guilt in his eyes, guilt and disbelief. "My mother said you left. She said you took money and ran." Naomi's jaw clenched. Of course she did. It's easier to call a woman a liar than admit you abandoned her. Eli shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between them. Mama, you know Daddy? The question, so innocent, broke the wall of composure in both adults. Naomi knelt, brushing his cheek gently. Yes, baby. I knew him a long time ago. Seojin swallowed hard, his eyes softening as he crouched beside them. Eli, he said carefully, his Korean accented with the faintest tremor, do you know who I am? The boy hesitated, then nodded. You're the man from Mama's stories, the one who liked spicy noodles but couldn't cook. Naomi froze. Eli looked at her proudly. You said that once. About your friend from Korea. The color drained from Seojin's face. You told him about me. I told him about a man I used to care about, she said coldly. Not about the one who forgot we existed. A knock on the door shattered the fragile quiet. Yuna, Seojin's fiancée, stood there, poised, elegant, her expression hard to read. Seojin, your assistant said you. She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes landing on Naomi, then the child beside her. Who are they? Naomi straightened. We were just leaving. But before she could move, Eli smiled brightly. Hi, I'm Eli. Are you Daddy's friend? The words hung in the air like thunder. Yuna's face went pale. Daddy, she repeated. She turned to Seojin, horror and fury battling across her face. What is he talking about? Seojin's silence was an answer in itself. Yuna's voice cracked. Tell me this isn't true. Naomi took Eli's hand. Come on, sweetheart. But before they could reach the door, it opened again. An older woman swept in, sharp suit, flawless pearls, and the unmistakable aura of command. Madame Han, the matriarch of the Han family. Her gaze sliced through the room like glass. When her eyes found Naomi, her mouth curved into a thin, venomous smile. I knew it. Like a shadow that refuses to fade. Naomi's spine straightened. You've aged well, she said evenly. Hatred must be excellent skincare. The older woman's eyes narrowed. You dare speak to me that way after what you did to my son? What I did. Naomi's laugh was soft, dangerous. You mean loving him when he was broke, when your name meant nothing. You mean raising his child alone while you called me a stain. Eli looked up confused. Mama, who's she? She's your grandmother, Naomi said before Madame Han could open her mouth. Eli smiled shyly. Hello, grandmother. He took a step forward, hopeful, open, but Madame Han recoiled like he'd reached out with fire. Don't touch me, she snapped. The boy froze. The smile slipped from his face, confusion clouding his eyes. But Mama said family should hug. The room fell silent. Naomi knelt beside him, her voice trembling but steady. It's okay, baby. Some people forget how to love. That's not your fault. Seojin looked between them, anguish rising in his expression. Mother, stop, he said quietly. He's a child. He's a scandal, she hissed. A reminder of your weakness. You think this woman loves you? She'll ruin you again. Naomi stood, her voice calm but cutting. I'm not here for your approval. My son wanted to meet his father, nothing more. She took Eli's hand and turned toward the door. But Madame Han's voice followed, cold as steel. You won't walk away this time, Miss Okafor. Not without consequences. Naomi turned slowly, meeting her gaze. You already took everything from me once. I survived. Try again, and you'll see what I've become. Security guards hovered at the threshold, uncertain. Eunice stared, shaking, realization sinking in. You lied to me, she whispered to Seojin. All this time. She slipped off her engagement ring and placed it on the glass table with a soft click. You deserve each other, she said, before walking out without another glance. As the doors closed behind her, Naomi exhaled, her hands trembling. Eli clung to her leg, frightened now. Seojin took a step forward, his voice quiet, pained. Naomi, please. Don't leave yet. I need to understand. But Naomi shook her head. Understand what? That your mother bought your silence 10 years ago? That you chose comfort over courage? Her eyes softened, just for a moment. You don't need to understand, Seojin. You just need to live with what you did. And with that, she led Eli out through the lobby, past the staring employees, past the whispers and camera flashes. Her son's small hand gripped hers tightly, but his voice was soft when he asked, "Mama, why did Daddy look so sad?" Naomi didn't answer. Outside, the winter wind cut through the city, sharp and merciless. She looked back once, through the glass doors, where Seojin stood watching them go, and for the first time, she saw it clearly. The man she had loved was gone, replaced by someone trapped inside his mother's empire. But as Eli leaned against her side, murmuring, "It's okay, Mama. We don't need him," Naomi realized something else too. Her son wasn't the one who had lost a family that day. It was Seojin. Because for all his power, all his wealth, and all his pride, he just watched the only truth that ever mattered walk out the door. Rain drummed against the courtroom windows as though Seoul itself were holding its breath. 10 days had passed since that confrontation in Honteka's tower, and the entire city now knew the story: the foreign woman, the hidden child, the fallen heir. Naomi sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Across from her, Madame Han sat regal and unrepentant, her lawyers whispering like snakes. Between them, Eli sat with a sketchbook in his lap, drawing a house with 3 stick figures: himself, his mother, and a man standing slightly apart. When he added a son in the corner, Naomi's throat tightened. She hadn't slept since the summons arrived, a court order filed by Madame Han, claiming Naomi was an unfit mother who had kidnapped her own son. It was the same cruelty as a decade ago, only wrapped in legal paper. Han Seojin entered last. The once celebrated CEO looked hollow now, Tai Askew, eyes red from sleepless nights. He walked past his mother without acknowledgement, his footsteps echoing through the marble chamber. When he sat beside Naomi, she tensed. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "To fix what I broke," he said quietly. "If you'll let me." The judge entered, and the hearing began. Madame Han's lawyer spoke first, painting Naomi as a manipulative opportunist who had deceived the Han family. Every sentence stung, but Naomi stayed still, her gaze locked on the judge, her silence her strength. When her turn came, she stood with quiet grace. "I didn't come to Korea for money," she said. "I came because my son deserves to know the truth. If that truth costs me everything, so be it." Her voice wavered only once, when she turned toward Eli. "He deserves to know that love can survive even when people fail." Then came Seojin's testimony. The courtroom leaned in as he rose, eyes fixed on the woman who had once ruled his life. "Mother," he began, "you told me she left because she wanted money. That she used me. But you lied." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small digital recorder. "You said I was too young to remember, but I never forgot what you did. I have proof." He pressed play. The courtroom filled with Madame Han's unmistakable voice. "Erase her from our lives. Pay her off. If she doesn't take it, we'll make sure no one believes her." Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's gavel struck wood sharply. Madame Han's lawyer scrambled, but the damage was done. Seojin's voice shook as he continued. "I let her destroy everything once: my love, my child, my integrity. I won't let her do it again." Naomi stared at him, stunned. This was not the man who'd watched her walk away in shame years ago. This was someone fighting for redemption. When the judge adjourned briefly, Seojin turned to her. "I should have fought for you then," he said. "But I'm fighting now." Naomi wanted to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Her heart, however, remembered the warmth, the laughter, the promises under the neon haze of Seoul nights long ago. Could she trust him again? Did forgiveness mean reopening a wound that had barely scarred? Before she could answer, Eli looked up from his drawing. "Mama," he whispered, "can we go home after this?" She smiled softly. "Yes, baby. No matter what happens, we're going home." When the judge returned, the verdict was swift. The custody claim was dismissed. Madame Han was censured for perjury and interference. "Miss Okafor," the judge said, her tone almost gentle, "you may not have power or wealth, but you have truth. And in this courtroom, truth still matters." Naomi exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Across the aisle, Madame Han sat motionless, fury masked by defeat. She'd lost not just the case, but the son she'd built her empire to control. Outside, the rain had stopped. Seoul shimmered beneath the clearing sky, neon lights blurring into reflection on wet pavement. Naomi stepped out with Eli's hand in hers. "Is it over, Mama?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Almost, love. Almost." Seojin followed them, stopping a few paces behind. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Eli turned, hesitant. "Can he come with us?" Naomi hesitated, the weight of a decade between them. Seojin took a cautious step forward. "Only if your mother says yes." Eli looked up at her with wide, hopeful eyes, the same eyes that mirrored the man she once loved. Naomi met Seojin's gaze. "You don't get to walk back into our lives and pretend the past didn't happen." Her voice was calm, firm. "But if you mean to be in his life, prove it. No promises. No press releases. Just show up." Seojin nodded. "I will." There was no grand embrace, no cinematic reconciliation, only a quiet understanding that the hardest part wasn't over, but beginning. Weeks passed. The headlines moved on, the scandal fading into Seoul's endless churn of news. Naomi returned to her nursing work, Eli to school. Some nights, Seojin would appear at the edge of the playground, still in his suit, holding an umbrella. He never made a scene. He just waited for Eli to wave before walking them home. Slowly, the child's hesitation turned to laughter, the distance between father and son closing inch by inch. Months later, on a breezy spring afternoon, Naomi found herself at Han River Park. Eli was running ahead, chasing kites. Seojin approached quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You still take it black?" he asked. Naomi smiled faintly. "Some things don't change." They sat in silence for a long time, watching their son play. "You lost everything for the truth," she said finally. "Was it worth it?" Seojin followed her gaze toward Eli. "Every second." He hesitated, then added softly, "But I don't expect you to forgive me." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about choosing peace." As the sun dipped low, Eli ran back to them, holding a small kite tangled in its string. "It keeps falling," he said, frustrated. Naomi crouched, helping him untangle it. "That's okay, love. You just have to try again." Seojin knelt beside them, his hands steadying the kite as the boy laughed. The wind caught it, and it soared red and gold against the fading sky. And as Naomi watched the two of them, something inside her finally settled. Not everything broken needs to be mended the way it was before. Sometimes healing looks like letting go of anger, like watching your child laugh beside the man who once broke you and realizing the hurt no longer owns you. In that quiet golden light, with the Han River shimmering beside them and their son's laughter echoing in the breeze, Naomi understood the truth she had been running from all these years. She hadn't come back to reclaim her past. She'd come to reclaim her peace.